Alright, y'all, what's going on? So recently I uploaded a video of me hooking some fish on the tiny Klash. So I'm just going to kind of give you an update. Again, no one will watch these videos, but I like to blab on about swim baits. So here in wintertime, our lakes don't necessarily freeze over, at least most of them don't. But the fishing gets really tough. I usually steelhead fish during the winter just because bass fishing is not worth it to me because it's just such a tough bite, especially from bank fishing like I usually am. So we had, wintertime, blah, 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 you know what. Then a few weeks ago, we had a little bit of a warmer trend, right? The weather went from low 40s, mid 30s, and it jumped up to like high 50s, almost 60 degrees for about 2 or 3 days. And then it dropped down into like the mid 50s and in the low 50s. So our weather kind of jumped up a little bit. So I decided, heck, I'm probably not going to get anything. There's probably nothing up shallow yet. But I'm going to go mess around with the Tyrant. It was a nice day. The sun had came out. We were getting sick and tired of this cold winter. So the sun was out. So I was like, you know what? I'll just go down to the lake and throw the Tyrant around, just kind of mess with it a little bit. So I was throwing the Tyrant 8. It's a floating version, so I have the bubble in it. I've got the treble hook rig on the bottom. And I threw this around. I was throwing it up shallow against the bunch of brush and stuff that's hanging off the bank. Threw it up there, creeping it on top of the water, just kind of messing around with it, seeing what I could do, and bang, I got exploded on. And you might be able to see here in the back of this bait, there's some teeth marks there down the tail. And I think what happened was this fish came up and grabbed like the back half like this. I set the hook and it just pulled right out of his mouth. And that's why there's such hard scraping teeth marks. He probably had it clamped. And so with the Tyrant, I'm still learning how our fish eat them. Because if you watch Mike's videos, he has, Florida strain bass a lot of times. I'm fishing a northern strain bass. So they have smaller mouth, smaller fish overall. A really good fish. If I get anything, 4.5, 5 pounds, that's a really, really good fish for these northern strain. Anything above 5, 6 pounds, you're talking really nice fish. So what I'm targeting most of the time, or what I have chances at catching, are probably anything more from like 3 to like 5 pounds is like my average catch, right? So with that being said, I don't know how well those northern strains in that 3 to 5 pound range are going to be able to eat this Tyrant 8. I've got a lot of bites from them, but I've yet to land one on this Tyrant 8. And I think a lot of times they just come up and grab the back of it, and I swing. So I'm trying to figure out, like, do I let them eat it like I do with a beast hook style bait? Because I catch them on like a Citizen 7, a Citizen 6, right? But it's like you get that bite and you got to let them eat it. So like when you watch Mike's videos, his fish are coming up, headshotting it or engulfing the whole thing, and he's swinging pretty much right away. My fish come up and they grab the back half. So I'm thinking maybe next time one comes up and bites it, I just kind of do the same thing I do with the battle shads or the Citizens and just kind of keep reeling, or reel, maybe speed up my reel and let those fish try and eat the bait down to that treble hook. I don't know. I'm still messing with it. Anyway, long rant, I know. So then, I had that bite. I had a couple other ones come up and just bump it. So I knew that there was actually some fish active up shallow. Now, these lakes I'm fishing a lot of times are trout stocked. So throwing baits like this, especially when there's trout around, is perfect, right? So I go back to a different lake a couple days later, right? I actually went back to the lake I got bit with this, and I didn't get any more bites. So I was like, you know what, let me run over to this other lake. Maybe they're going to be active at this other lake too. So I go with the tiny Klash. I had the Tyrant tied on. I had a Battle Shad tied on as well. But I went with the tiny Klash. And I decided, okay, well, the water's cold. The fish may or may not be up shallow. We'll see. So I was kind of fishing that mid-range water column. Probably 5 to 7 feet of water from the bank. I was just casting out in 5 to 7 feet of water. And I was fishing this in, I don't know if it's mode A, mode B, what you want to call it, but the standard lip and the tail in there. And if you can see, the tail's pointing up, right? It's angled kind of up like this towards the sky. And what that does is it allows me to kind of do a dead walk. Now I know if you get a V-tail, which I actually have a V-tail, I just don't ever use it. But if you get the V-tail and like the short lip or whatever, it's really how you get the dead walk going, right? Where it walks really hard back and forth. But with the standard lip and standard tail, if I just flip that tail around so it's pointed up, I can still get the thing to do kind of that dead walk pretty good. So what I was doing was fishing this a lot like a jerkbait. I was throwing it out there in that 5 to 7 feet of water range. This lake is really grassy, but right now all the grass is dead. There's not really much green grass, but there's a lot of wood. So I was going, finding this wood that was sticking up in like 5 to 7 feet of water. I've said that 100 times now. And threw it out there, and I would just give it a couple cranks down. With this standard lip, cranking it, I can probably get it 5 to 7 feet down. Again, I said it. And so I would crank it down a couple times, probably to 3 or 4 feet down, I would assume. And then I would just start to do that like walk. And it's just kind of a little twitch of the rod and the reel. And I was throwing this on the Dobbins 806, which is overkill for this bait. You know, for the tiny Klash, you could throw something more of a conventional rod, more of a cranking rod. I think it only weighs 2 ounces. Or you could throw like the 795 if you're looking at Dobbins, or like, you know, a medium heavy swim bait rod that can handle like 1 to 5 ounces, 1 to 3 ounces, would throw this bait pretty good. But I was also throwing like the K9 a little bit, so I had the Dobbins 806. So it is a little bit overkill, and sometimes you got to be careful, because if you start getting carried away and working that 806 too hard, it will overwork the bait. It'll get it rolling and jerking too hard, which could get bit in certain situations. But with the water cold like it is, I just was trying to get this thing to just do that twitch back and forth. And so I was fishing it a lot like a jerkbait. I'd get it to twitch back and forth, and then I'd pause. And I paused, one of the fish I caught was actually, I paused it for probably 30 seconds, just sitting there, and the fish about yanked the rod out of my hand while the bait was paused. Just boom, he came up and hammered it. And what I did is I put a little bit of weight on here to actually get this thing to almost suspend, or a very, very slow float. This is a tiny Klash low, but you know, they make the low and the high with your Klash baits, and both of them are floating, right? The high floats really high in the water. It sits way up on top. The low kind of sits down, but they still, both of them float really good. So this tiny Klash low, if I were to throw it out there with no extra weight, it's still going to want to just float up pretty quickly to the surface. So what I did is I attached a little piece of mono, that's like 15-pound mono, to the ring here, and then I just tied that mono on there, and then I took a piece of what I call pencil lead, or some people call it stick lead, and I've never actually seen anybody do this before, but this is hollow core, what I call pencil lead. We use it in steelhead fishing, and you can get just big rolls of it. It's just a big roll of lead with a hole in the middle of it. You guys may or may not be able to see that. There's a little tiny hole through there. So all you do is you cut a little piece off, you know, such like this, and you just slide it over that mono, and then you just pinch it on there with a pair of pliers. Almost like split shot. You could honestly use like a split shot as well. Just crimp a split shot on there, for those of you guys that know what that is. A lot of guys in the bass world don't even really use split shot that much. But, you know, this pencil lead does the same thing, except you can adjust it very easily. I can cut off, I wish I had a roll here. They come in just a big roll of it. And you can just cut off as much as you want, slide it on that line, and pinch it on there, and it works really good for weighting down the Klash baits. You just put a little piece on there, just enough to get it to just either, I don't like it to sink, I still like it to either suspend or slow float a little bit. If I was fishing like 20 foot of water and really trying to get it down there, then I might add enough weight to get it to sink, but I still want to be careful and not lose this bait, so having it very slow float or that suspend, I'm not as worried about pausing it and it sinking down and getting hung up on, you know, whatever's on the bottom, rocks, logs, whatever it may be. So I was twitching that, so I got that bait to suspend, doing that little twitch, twitch, pause. Twitch, 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 pause. And it was getting absolutely smoked. On video, I hooked 2. and landed them on video, and then I hooked another big one that was probably at least a 6-pounder, and it came off at the bank. I don't know if you guys watched that video. Go watch it if you haven't, but hooked the fish, got it up to the bank, and I knew it was a big one, and I just went to kind of drag it up on the bank because you don't have a lot of options, you know, when you're on the bank. I don't like to carry a net with me, and it'd kind of be a pain in the butt too. Sometimes you can try and lip them, but with the treble hook bait, you got treble hook everywhere. So I just thought, okay, I'm just going to drag this fish up on the bank because that's what I did with the other fish I caught. And the fish came up to the bank, you know, knocked his head a couple times, and there went the bait, and the fish flopped right back into the lake. So I was really bummed about that. That was a really, really nice fish. The other fish I got like a 4.5-pounder that day, like a little 2.5 or 3-pounder. And then I actually wasn't recording. The GoPro wigged out on me, but I got another one that was around 4.5. So pretty solid day for, you know, around here fishing early spring for northern strain fish. You know, that's a pretty solid day. And so I just wanted to kind of explain to you guys what I was doing, how I was fishing that Tiny Klash. For hooks on here, my Tiny Klash, I like to run size 2. These are the Gamakatsu, the round bend. You know, the Butch Brown turned a lot of people on that. The Gamakatsu round bend bronze. They actually are one of my favorite hooks. They're super sticky sharp. They're strong enough that they're going to hold on a bigger fish. I do bend them out occasionally. I actually bent one out that day when I caught those fish. But I've never had an issue where like I bent one out and lost a fish because of it. You know, a lot of times they bend it out, you know, when you flip it up on the bank, or like when that fish is flopping around, you know, on the bank or in a net or whatever. That's usually when you bend a hook out. Or, you know, you hook it on one and it bends, but another hook catches. So normally I'm not worried about losing a fish because of a bent out hook. And if it bends out, I just change it out. I like to get, like right here, Gamakatsu, round bend bronze, size 2. I get like the big packs of them. These are 25 in here. Get a couple packs of those and carry them with you. And then if you have an issue, you know, every time, you know, I get snagged up, or I hit some rocks, or I catch a fish, you know, I check these hooks, and if they feel dull at all, they feel bent at all, I just swap it out. You know, get yourself a little pair of split ring pliers with a little hook on the end, and just swap them out and get fresh hooks on there. It's always good to have nice, fresh, sharp hooks on there, you know. I would rather, you know, spend more money on hooks and swap out hooks a lot more than, you know, not swap my hooks out and lose fish. Same with split rings. You know, you can upgrade your split rings. Most of them are fine. These are stock split rings that came with this Tiny Klash, and I haven't had any issues yet with them. So most of the time I'm not too worried about split rings bending out, but with hooks, I like these Gamakatsu round bends. I actually run them the size 2 on a lot of baits. So like the Tiny Klash, I run the size 2 on. I could probably step down to the size 4 if I wanted to. And then if I grab a bait like, if I grab a bait like the K9, here's the K9, I fish the same exact hooks, the size 2 on the K9. And some of you guys might think that's crazy. I fish the same hooks on the Tiny Klash as I do the K9. But I like to fish smaller hooks, you know, and those fish a lot of times will come up when you're working this hard bait, right? Especially like the Klash baits that I can get to suspend, where it's like twitch, and then you like pause it. A lot of times those fish are just going to come up and grab one of these hooks. You know, a lot of times you see these fish following it, and they just come up and nip at the bait, and a lot of times they're just, I don't know if it's because they see it and think it's a fin, or for whatever reason, a lot of times they'll actually target that hook and just wrap right around it. So having these smaller hooks, I feel like is not, I'm not really losing any fish or missing any fish that I wouldn't if I had bigger hooks on. You know, I threw quads on here for a while. I had some big, like, I don't know if they were like 1/0 or number 1 quads on here. I've tried the ST, the owner ST, what is it, the 36 or 41s. I've tried those ones on here. But I really like to just go with those size 2 Gamakatsu round bends. And, you know, a lot of times when these fish come up, they're either going to like headshot it and get that hook, they're going to grab the tail, get that hook, or they're going to T-bone it and both the hooks are going to end up stuck in the fish. So I don't know, I'm just a huge fan of those size 2 Gamakatsus. I even use them on HUDs. Like when I rig up a HUD, I use the same exact hook, a same size 2. This one's got a belly treble on it, but the same thing, a size 2 Gamakatsu. And it hides, I can hide it in the fins on the HUD, and you don't even really see it down there. But it's enough hook that it's going to stick those fish, and it's strong enough that I have yet to have really too many issues, or any issues rather, with that hook. Like I said, you know, sometimes you will catch a fish and your hook will end up being bent out. Whether that happens, you know, fighting the fish, or like after you get them on the bank or in the net or whatever, and they flop around a little bit, sometimes that's where the hooks get bent the most. So I've had them get bent, but like I've always landed the fish, and then you just grab a new hook and put it on there and you're good to go. So I like fishing those size 2s a lot. I actually have them, let me grab a, I actually also have them on my 250 as well. So here's a depth 250 with those same size 2 hooks that are on the Tiny Klash. And again, I seem to hook up fish just fine with them. And it kind of goes along with like the stealthiness, the Mike Gilbert kind of style, where it's like when you're fishing these small and light hooks, these hooks just kind of hide themselves away. And if you're working this bait, a lot of times these hooks will actually fold back and just kind of hide. And then when that fish comes up and hits that bait, it gets those hooks. So, you know, I like to fish the smaller hooks on them. But anyway, yeah, that's my swim bait rant for now. Oh, for line, if anyone's still watching, for line, I like to throw 20 pound. The Tiny Klash, again, you could throw like 15 or 17 pound. You could easily throw 15 pound fluorocarbon or mono. With this Tiny Klash, it doesn't weigh really anything, kind of just like a big crankbait or a big jerk bait, right? But it's not that big, so you could probably throw 15 on it just fine. But because I was throwing it on my 806 setup, which my 806, I also throw the K9, and I also throw a 250 on the Dobbins 806, which a lot of people don't do and don't recommend because it is a lot of bait. For the 806, but once you get it out there and you get swimming and you hook up on fish, I feel like the 806 handles very, very well. It handles fighting treble hooks, like these treble hooks size 2 or like size 2, size 1, 1/0, stuff like that. Those not giant treble hooks, but those, you know, I mean, they're pretty good sized treble hooks, but they're not giant treble hooks. But that 806 handles it really good and fights those fish really good on that. So I like to throw the 250 on it as well. So 20 pound fluorocarbon is what I had rigged up there. And actually in the video, I had an old Corrado. This is an old Corrado I. I don't know if you guys remember this model. I don't know what year they actually made these, but it's old Corrado I. You could hear it squeaking really, really bad in the video. And I've blown this reel up a couple times. I used it for salmon and steelhead for a long time and burned it out pretty good fishing for salmon. The salmon take you on a run. You know, bass fight pretty good, but man, there's nothing like hooking a fresh, you know, salt salmon or steelhead that just come in from the salt. They tear you up and peel drag. And so they kind of burned up this reel. I got it replaced, some of the bearings, but then the anti-reverse has been all jacked up. The bearings squeak really bad. So it's pretty beat up. So I actually replaced it and put a Corrado 200K on that same rod. So now in my future videos, you'll see me fishing with that 200K, the Corrado. So that's what that setup is. And yeah, I'm going to stop ranting now and let you guys get off of here.